Good morning, guys. Welcome to another episode of Costa Rica Real Estate and Investments. This is episode 69. We're nearly at the big 70. Actually, let me just make sure that this is, no, actually, I take that back. We are at 70. Plowing through the podcast, of course. Again, if anybody would like to see any particular topics discussed, I'm getting quite a few emails. This one, we actually discussed closing costs. Well, not closing costs, the actual closing process. So that was a request from Bruce up in Canada. If anybody else has any other requests, let me know, and I will find experts to go over those particular topics. So today we're going to be talking to David Carr. David, if you guys remember, owns the franchise of Coldwell Bankers in Jaco. He's been in the area for many, many years. He's very knowledgeable. Yeah, I mean, it's just if you're looking at doing anything in the Central Pacific area, about an hour and a half from San Jose, he's your guy. So all of his contact details will be in the description below. Remember, guys, please give the thumbs up and review this podcast as much as you can, kind of spread the word. We are seeing I would say an exponential growth in the number of people listening to this. I think we're probably about to hit 50,000 downloads probably by about next week. It's just picking up and picking up. And a lot of you actually reaching out to me because I offer some consulting services to help people find what there is that it's looking for. Of course, I work basically for you, but I am not a realtor, as I mentioned to people. Again, I don't chase commissions. You do basically pay me as a consultant, but that makes sure that I'm on your side of the transaction. So I'm always looking at exit strategy, understanding your lifestyle, and really what it is that you're looking for. So anyone that wants to contact me, you can. info@investingcostarica.com. Even if you want a chat or you're looking to relocate down here and want my advice, again, I've been down here for 17 years, bought, sold, developed all over Costa Rica, and also managed Costa Rica's largest luxury travel company. Well, owned it. You can contact me again, info@investingcostarica.com. But let's get straight into it with David. Good morning, David. How are you?
Good morning. How's it going?
Good. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm sure you've become a lot busier since you've taken over the Coldwell Banker franchise over there in Jaco. So I appreciate you making the time.
For sure. Always like doing the podcast with you, Richard. So I'm excited to chat, kind of talk shop.
Let's talk shop. So, I'm starting to see signs, the markets are kind of cooling off a little bit. I saw gold and commodities are through the roof at the moment. This, Russia invasion of Ukraine, it's taking a bit of a hit to the stock markets. But is the market slowing down at all since we last talked? And again, are prices rising? I mean, what's happening in the market at the moment?
Yeah, in the Central Pacific area, it's definitely still active, right? And inventory just becomes an issue every month more and more. We're seeing the amount of buyers is outpacing any sort of new sellers coming on the market. So it's still plenty active. We do have, some people that have maybe paused a little bit or starting to maybe bring up things like the market and world conditions, like with what's going on in Russia. So, but for the most part, it hasn't really slowed things down. I think at least in our area, what I'm kind of seeing a little bit of causing some slowdown is more because of the inventory, where you have people saying, oh man, that's all I have available. They want to buy and they're still interested, but it's like, can't find what I'm looking for. So I think I'm going to kind of pause and wait. There was in the Jaco area, I think there was a final kind of run of some of that good inventory left, where that kind of people moved quickly on it. And now it's, oh shoot, not much left. So I think you have a little bit of that.
Random question, because I always kind of keep my ear to the ground and we often chat. The Tres Regalos property that you had, and then also the one up over there in Los Sueños, which is a great price. Are they still available, both of them?
They are. So there are still some sneaky deals out there.
Yep.
And it seems like where those values are the ones where you aren't getting the great ocean view, right? Yep. So if you can kind of settle and sacrifice that, you can get great value.
But I mean, Tres Regalos, you can open your door and listen to the ocean.
Exactly. I mean, 30 units. I mean, you just walk right there. You're enjoying the beach. You're enjoying that beach living.
Yep.
$259 for a 3-bedroom.
Yeah, I mean, I've stayed there. It's beautiful.
Yeah. It's under 200 a square foot for furnished beachfront property.
And they rent pretty well as well.
Rent fine. I mean, it really hits all the boxes. But again, the Costa Rican buyer, for the most part, is very picky, right? They have a standard, they have a dream. They're coming down here thinking that, oh, I want this, and it's very hard for a lot of those buyers to make those concessions and sacrifice some things. So, but with where the market is, that's what's going to have to happen. I mean, you are just going to have to, and much like in the States, right? If you're in the States or Canada, you don't have the luxury of getting to choose everything on your wish list. You're just kind of happy that you can even find a property and you win the bid, so to speak, right? So here, I think that's where we're at, and getting people to transition to that understanding and that expectation.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we were about to see a bit of a kind of wait period here before more stuff kind of starts to come online, which could take a year or two. While permissions are given, studies are done, because again, there was that like stop, then that craziness, and everyone's like, now I need to start planning to build stuff here, or etc. So that's going to take a while to kind of catch up.
Yeah, for sure. And the one thing too that I would aid caution on certain people thinking is people that now, with the stock market that you brought up, with Russia, some people are saying, oh, we might be on interest rates. I see things going backwards. We're going to go on a recession here. And I think those people are going to be, I think they're doing themselves an injustice by thinking that with our market. If they're thinking that 6 months from now, we're going to go backwards, I really don't foresee that. Yeah. And I want to remind people that this is a cash market. So if the stock market goes down, if inflation keeps up, if anything, that only is going to justify some of these prices going up. And I think what's going to happen is when the new construction kicks in and these higher prices to build kicks in, some of this existing inventory that is below replacement costs, people are going to say, what are we doing? Right? What am I doing selling for 200 a square foot when people can't build for that or replace at that? So, yeah.
How often are you seeing people buying land and building at the moment in Central Pacific?
And in our area, it's not as common. It's just really hard to make it work because of, I think, the permitting and the logistics of infrastructure and the parcels and the price of dirt on top of it. It's pretty hard. I mean, we're definitely getting interest in it, and definitely some people are going at it, but by and large, it's not a huge play.
It should be. It looks like there's an opportunity to do that. The Southern Pacific areas, Uvita Dominical or Jaco has a lot of that going on. The northern areas of Guanacaste as well. A lot of residential condominium complexes, developments that have agricultural parcels, that kind of stuff. It just doesn't seem to be that much of a thing, in the Central Pacific at the moment.
It isn't. And I think it's just the nature of our parcels, right? I think down south, you have those ready. Right? You have an ocean view lot that you could build tomorrow. It's good to go. We don't have those as much where, you can buy some land, but you're going to have to probably do some road work to get it ready. You're going to have to do some leg work to get the water ready. You're going to have to do all these things. And actually what they're doing now down south is now they're getting to the point where they're selling the pre-construction house on it, right? Where it's like, here's the designs, we're ready to go. You're gonna just pay for the house to be built, wait 6 months or a year, whatever it is, and we'll deliver it to you.
Yeah. Well, let's change subjects a little bit. A while back, a listener, Bruce, contacted me and wanted to kind of go through kind of the closing process a little bit more. And so I wanted to cover that in today's, you'll be kind of the main focus of today's podcast here. But what are at a very high level, what are the kind of the main steps? And then let's jump into kind of more of the details of each step. But what would you say the main steps are?
So really the first step is once you find the right property, it's making that offer. So once you make that offer, it's pretty simple. It's typically with a, simple purchase offer or, letter of intent. And then once you reach an agreement and enter contract, That's really when you get to work.
When you say enter contract, you mean like a sales purchase agreement has been signed?
Correct. So that's once you got that agreed by both parties, right? And that's when you're going to commit the attorney. That's when you're going to typically open escrow, assuming escrow is involved, maybe hire an inspection, really begin with that due diligence. So often due diligence can be 15 to 30 days. That's typically what we work around. And that's the time where you're going to you come to Jesus, you check your title, check the property, make sure everything is good and that you're going to proceed with this.
Yeah.
So that's your window for all of that. And then after that due diligence, you're basically going to be committed with some sort of hard deposit at that point. And again, typically we're working with escrow. That deposit is going to be held in escrow. Funds then will be placed in escrow prior to closing. And it's pretty smooth process from there. I mean, the attorneys are really, us as realtors, we're just really the ones facilitating everything, making sure everyone's following up, things of that nature.
Yep. Well, I mean, look, I mean, let's just jump in. I mean, the offer is pretty simple. Again, I'm offering you X amount, we'll close on this date. Will you, you kind of accept that? Usually the offer can sometimes be verbal, it can be, as you mentioned there, like a letter of intent, and sometimes you just jump straight into the sales purchase agreement. You don't even go, for the offer, you just jump straight into the sales purchase agreement. Sometimes, personally, when I'm working with clients, I like to figure out kind of where we're at on stuff. And which one's kind of necessary, because sometimes it's just like, well, I might as well just forget the offer and go straight to the sales purchase agreement. And the sales purchase agreement, of course, is quite a few, can be a couple of pages long. And I mean, that's where you're going backwards and forwards, right?
For the most part, yeah. Getting the terms back and forth, right? Oh, we want a little bit longer for due diligence. Oh, we want to close on this date and things of that nature.
Who's paying closing costs? What's necessary in order for the escrow to go hard potentially? Does the escrow go hard? Can the buyers pull out at any moment? I mean, it's kind of a dance between the seller and the buyer, right?
Yep.
Because I mean, I think we've probably seen deals where it's gone from everything of like, your deposit goes hard as soon as the sales purchase agreement is signed to like, I can get that deposit back at any moment that I want to.
Yeah. And that brings up a good point that I think, people maybe are unaware of or get confused on. So we keep bringing up escrow. Escrow's the kind of the wild card in this situation. What has happened is that escrow has become complicated if the funds especially need to come to Costa Rica, because then we need to adhere to international banking regulations. And that's burdensome. It can take time to get a lot of the paperwork that they're requesting. So sometimes, for example, you'll have some realtors or some sellers that they'll be a little bit anxious, especially in a hot market. Well, they'll say, hey, Richard, okay, great, we've got a deal, but if you're serious, I need you to send a deposit, even if it's an escrow, but I need you to send a deposit, put your money where your mouth is right away, right? I'm not going to wait 15 days or 30 days for you to send a deposit because you can be jerking me around.
Which I think is fair, right? It shows commitment.
Absolutely. And I think most serious buyers aren't going to have a problem with that. The challenge is, however, going back to that escrow, if that deposit is held in escrow, it can take some time to open up escrow these days. Yeah. Escrows are backed up. You might be, as a buyer here in Costa Rica, making that offer, need to wait till you get back to the US to start maybe getting some of that paperwork. So it presents a little bit of a challenge where we can't get a deposit in until we get the escrow in. And these days, escrow, I've had some cases where escrow is taking more than a month to be open.
That's insane.
So yeah, exactly.
I know if you're dealing with like investment groups or a corporation, they need the articles of incorporation, they need them apostilled, all that stuff. Like, it gets really complicated. When you're dealing with an individual, sometimes it's less complicated, but sometimes it's not. Again, it comes back to source of funds that they want to see. And that's while here in Costa Rica. So, I mean, I think if the buyer and the seller are not, they don't want the money in Costa Rica, there's no point in using a Costa Rican escrow. You might as well use something like TLA up in Texas or another type of escrow.
And that's how most of us have pivoted.
Yeah, just because, again, it's just different because, again, the money's not leaving the States, so it just kind of flies around. You've just got an escrow service there. And I think most people that are buying property down here with cash have probably used escrow before.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. That's how the industry has shifted. Most of us are now using a US-based escrow, which they don't have to comply for all that, and it's not as burdensome. So in that case, it's a lot easier, but it's definitely, I think the thing to convey to anyone listening is to understand that it's really a case-by-case basis.
Yep.
Some are going to be nice and easy. Some are going to be complicated because I think some people get frustrated when they might encounter that situation, and they just really, and that's something that I do. I always really try to prep people for the next step. Okay, look, we're going to have to use escrow here in Costa Rica. This entails this, or hey, we're going to have to have this kind of inspection, or hey, we're going to have to request this from the municipality, which means this. So I think the key, especially for the American buyer, I would say that tends to be a little impatient and anxious sometimes, is really making sure that they understand those next steps.
Should you always use escrow is the question here, David, in your opinion?
Not necessarily, right? I mean, I think that there are many times where we can bypass escrow. A lot of times the escrow is really, to be honest, the person that most wants to see escrow often is the seller. Yeah. Because I mean, we need a deposit. The buyer's not going to send a deposit straight to a seller. So, but a lot of times I encourage people to say, look, the deposit is not that important, in my opinion. Yeah. What's important for me is for the buyer to spend energy and resources in hiring an attorney and hiring an inspection and doing all the hassle of the paperwork. For me, that demonstrates seriousness more so than a deposit.
I always get nervous because I hear of circumstances sometimes where the lawyer being used also has an escrow company as well. And that always kind of throws up some red flags for me, just because, again, I'm always about separating concerns because you just never know. I mean, every so often, one in 1,000 cases you hear of some nightmare scenario, of course. Yeah. So I always I always advise people to kind of separate concerns on that one. So, I mean, have you had any experience with that? Do you think it's not an issue? I mean, what would be your advice for listeners?
Not for years, right? In the past, that used to be more common. You used to have even an attorney that would hold funds. Now most attorneys understand, they know they don't even go there. They're not even willing to.
Not unless they want to get into trouble.
Yeah. Most of them are savvy, and if they're not advising against it, then that's probably a red flag too.
Well, let's jump into due diligence a little bit, because again, I think we've got through the steps of like the offer, which is kind of letter of intent, the sales purchase agreement, where you've agreed terms, escrow has been set up, you provide all of the necessary kind of know your client information, you've put the deposit in there, etc. Now we get to due diligence. I mean, typically, what are the steps in the due diligence phase?
So a big part of that is really the attorney checking out title, liens, things of that nature. So they're basically doing the logistics of the property. If there's an HOA involved, if there's survey maps, things of that nature. Yep. So they're the one kind of handling that. And then the other big due diligence, in our market, we're a lot of condos, so we don't get as many of the inspections on condos, but especially on a house, you definitely want to have a reputable person inspecting that home. Yep. What's a little bit different here is that I think, and again, this is something that people need to be aware of. In the US, often an inspection report means that if there's any sort of issues, that those are going to be addressed. Here, you have a lot of these properties that have deferred maintenance. Yep. I mean, each property, sun, humidity, it is what it is. That doesn't necessarily mean an inspection report is going to give you the right to renegotiate or request every little minor item. Now, If there's a substantial issue, hey, the roof is about to fall through. Hey, this electrical is, you're going to get electrocuted. Then obviously those are things to typically get addressed. But minor things that usually is just more peace of mind and a list for you of things that you can do after the purchase.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the due diligence is different if you're buying land than you're buying a condo, than you're buying a home, of course. Again, condo usually has maintenance. You don't, majority of the time, you don't have common areas. I mean, there is, but they don't need to be looked at. But like if you're buying a home, you potentially, again, you want a very deep home inspection. You probably also want to just take a quick look at the survey as well. Maybe just have a topographer take a look. That's, someone's not built on some piece of your land, or, I mean, yeah.
Yep, for sure. So yeah, that's really it. I mean, and you're going to find that out. I mean, often 2 weeks is substantial right now with things being busy. Sometimes a little bit more time because people are backed up. And then I would say in cases of land, those are usually going to need a little bit more time than that.
Yeah, I'm juggling chainsaws at the moment with 3 clients that have asked me to find them land, and then they've made an offer. It got accepted after some heavy negotiation here with some local farmers, which was interesting. And then again, we had the topographers out this week. We've got the soil studies today. I've just that everything's okay. That people sometimes think, hey, I'm going to buy a piece of land. That's great. But if you've got to go 6 to 8 meters down and put your foundations in, that could cost you a lot of money. You could be looking at like $10, $20, $30,000 just on foundations, on a home. And that's what you don't see. It's kind of like an iceberg. So it's important to do all of that due diligence.
For sure. So, and I always tell people, I'm like, look, whatever's your comfort level.
Yep.
So most sellers are going to typically be reasonable as long as there's good faith and they're showing that the buyers are serious. But we're shifting a little bit with the market the way it is. Sellers are getting a little bit more antsy. They're becoming a little bit more in charge, right? Calling the shots. So it is definitely shifting a little bit in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, again, just jumping back to land and even the homes, I mean, if there's a creek or a river close by, you probably want to get an invu study done just to see what the setback is from that as well. Because again, if someone's built within that setback, you could have an issue. I mean, the municipality could come back at any moment and tell you to knock that down. So,
for sure.
There's a lot of technicalities on that kind of stuff. And again, that's where you really need an expert to help you with that stuff.
For sure. And then, kind of continuing with that, right? So your due diligence, your closing process. Once we get to the closing process, usually what you're going to get is a closing statement prior to the closing. Usually that's going to be maybe a week before, and then both parties are going to see, yep, this is the amount, this is where funds are going. Then you fund your escrow. So the funds are ready, closing, they get dispersed exactly as agreed.
Well, let me just ask a question there, because again, it's a question sometimes. If I don't live in this country, meaning that I'm just using it as a vacation rental investment, should I have it in my name or a corporation's name?
Great question. I would say that for the most part, I still think that it's better to hold in a corporation. It's a little bit, you've got some liabilities there that are protected. And it's also a lot easier for estate planning, for transitioning if something happens to you, if you want to pass it on to kids. I just think for the minimal cost, it's just better.
Well, I mean, the other advantages is you can give someone a power of attorney, can go and do something for you. Whereas if it's you as an individual, it's not so easy. In a corporation, the lawyer can write up a power of attorney pretty quickly. So, I mean,
services too, right? Yeah. Services are easier to get. I mean, it's really the way to go. Yeah. And so really, okay, what's the downside, right? Like, well, why would I consider holding it in my name? And really at the end of the day, it's just really costs. It's just saving a couple $100s in corporate taxes per year, and a few $100s, maybe $1,000 for my court. So it's pretty minimal for the level of investment that you're making, that I just feel like it's silly to not consider it.
So, I mean, at closing, if I'm putting the property in my name, of course, I'm going to have to be there. If it's in the name of a corporation, I could basically do a power of attorney and the notary could sign on my behalf, correct?
Correct. And that's what most people do. Often I would say most of my clients are not here for closing.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Well, let's change gears a little. Well, let me just summarize that. So typically we go with the offer, then we have the sales purchase agreement, then typically we do escrow, we fund that. Again, we covered escrow inside and outside of Costa Rica, depending on where the seller is and where people want the money. Of course, that doesn't stop you having to pay all the transfer taxes and all that. That's still the same. It's just the money doesn't hit here in Costa Rica, of course. Then we go through due diligence. And again, if all of that goes well, then basically you go to closing. And of course, there'll typically be the seller's lawyer and the buyer's lawyer, there. So I think that's it in a nutshell. Have we missed anything?
The important one that everyone misses after the sale,
yep.
Right? Because I think, and unfortunately, the attorneys, I think, for the most part, don't do a good job of supplying the information after the sale. So there's a few things where I always encourage to check with your attorney after about 3 weeks after, do a follow-up, and just get the letter from the registry, getting the documentation showing that the property has been registered into your name or corporation. So just get that. It's always good to have. Don't just assume that they're going to do it, right? Yeah. Because the way it works is after closing is when they go to register the property. So that's something that's good to do. And then get all your ducks in a row. Find out, talk to your attorney, say, okay, now how do I pay my taxes? And I have a corporation. What do I need to file every year? When do I do that? And how do I do that? So really, electricity, now what? Do I switch that over to my name? How do I do that? So all of those transitional questions, I think sometimes everyone gets so excited, I'm in, I'm done, wrapped up, that they forget, there are some responsibilities of owning property that you do need to be aware of.
Yeah, no, hey, I mean, it's like most things, right? It's like having a baby, starting a business, it's all exciting at the beginning. And then, once you're actually in the day-to-day, you're like, oh, this is a lot harder than I thought it would be.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, and also setting up a bank account, I think a property management company could probably help with kind of a lot of that. If anybody wants to get a property management company involved. But also in your experience, how long does it take for the actual registry for the property to now be in someone's name in that transfer?
I usually say within 3 weeks. I think most attorneys are probably, doing it pretty quick. I don't know how long it actually takes to get filed and whatnot, but within 3 weeks, it should be there. It should be filed.
Awesome. Well, I think there's been great information on that process from start to finish, but let's just change gears a little bit and jump into the Jaco area. I know that that's where you live. Again, the Central Pacific is where you do business, but how would you describe Jaco to anybody that's listening to the podcast?
So Jaco has its reputation. It's gritty. That's the best, I think, word that I use to describe Jaco. If you are looking for perfectly manicured, a little bit on the snobbish side, all your sidewalks, it's a gritty surf town, right? You're gonna see a crackhead on the street. You're gonna see some people that for some people might look threatening. They aren't.
Yeah.
But and it's just not perfectly pretty, and I think the difference with Jaco versus some of the other beach areas in Guanacaste is we have more of our influence of San Jose. We have more of that Central American urban look. But I think that's the appeal of it. I think there's people, as crazy as it sounds, they like that grittiness. They like the more of the hipster, hole in the wall, not perfectly polished type look. Yep. So that's something that I think you have to be able to embrace. And, obviously we have a reputation of there is prostitution here, right? There's drugs here. And if you're looking for that, you're definitely going to find that. I don't think it's in your face. However, I think it's important to bring up the transition that we are making. And I kind of stutter, right? Because with COVID, it's kind of hurt us in a way where, because of the hours of operation for some of these establishments, it's kind of pushed what maybe you would see at 1 a.m. or 12, midnight to 7 o'clock during those dinner hours.
Yeah.
Right. And it's unfortunate. It is what it is. So I think that doesn't hurt with our image. Or I mean, it does hurt with our image. But the good news is, and I don't think it's reflective of the changes that we're seeing in Jaco. And since I've been here, the amount of developments and projects and communities that are refraining from those type of party guests and bachelor parties and things like that, almost everywhere in Jaco now, they do not allow unregistered guests. Yeah. So you're not going to see that from a rental standpoint. And the dynamic has changed where the type of buyer has changed, right? Before, in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, you had the divorced single older guy, right? That was coming down here and wanted a couple girls on each arm, and you had more of that demographic. Now they're our age, right? With families, and or they're just not looking for that. So
I mean, I bring my family to Jaco.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And it's shifting that way. It really is, where when you go to stay in Tres Regalos, or, oh, you're not going to see it there. Now you're not going to see it at this place. You're not going to see it there, versus before you would see a rental here and there that would allow it.
Yeah. Well, my sense is it's also very, should I say, I say it's isolate, meaning it's pushed into one area of Jaco as well. It's not that you're going to see it everywhere,
Absolutely.
But I mean, Jaco, again, with Jaco Walk, a lot of investments, great restaurants, it's a bustling town. I think the word gritty is definitely a word to use. Again, I think in any place in the world, if you're looking for it, you can get it. Just, I think it might be a little bit more obvious there than in other areas of Costa Rica. I mean, you see a bit of it in Tamarindo, but I mean, you definitely, Jaco is probably more the pronounced, of seeing it. Again, during the day, you're probably not going to see anything, but as you mentioned, 7, 8 in the evening, you might start to see some of it. And then again, towards the midnight hours, of course, then you definitely, will. But a lot of people, again, they stay on the exteriors and they come in and they eat and then they go out. But I think you hit the nail on the head there. There's a lot more families moving in. And I think ultimately that's probably going to be pushed out, in the long term.
And more than anything, the best analogy I make is it's kind of like going to a busy restaurant, right? So when things are busy, you might not notice, oh, that table's dirty over there, and things don't stand out as much. So that's what's happening with Jaco, is that it's going to get drowned out more. So it's always going to be here, but it's not going to be as prevalent. And the other thing too is that I think people forget that, excuse me, no problem, right? Like if Jaco is not for you, Jaco is just the hub. So you got Los Sueños, right? You've got Hermosa, you've got Estorrillos, you've got Punta Leona, you've got Nativa. This whole region offers something for somebody. So if you don't want that gradient, if you do want perfectly manicured, great. Los Sueños is right there. And that's a great selling point for us. Jaco is a great selling point for Los Sueños. So the diversity in the region of property types and areas is definitely a huge, huge benefit.
Oh, and it's also the closest beach down to San Jose. So an hour and a half, you're in Jaco.
Yeah, and the value, right? So I think we do. Someone hit it, I think, perfectly. They said it just the other week. They said, "Man, I think if we got rid of that crowd completely, that I think properties would go up 25% tomorrow."
I mean, it happened. What would happen in Tamarindo? I mean, a 3-bedroom condo is $400,000-$500,000.
Yeah, and I think that is a reason. That reputation is what keeps our values a little bit low. But if anything, that presents opportunity. I mean, if you can handle it and you feel like, man, that's really not that big of a deal, then you've got an opportunity to get great value. And man, once things, as they improve, it's only going to show more upside.
So let me just ask where you've personally invested in Costa Rica, over the past couple of months, and where do you see yourself investing in the next 12 to 24 months? Because I do know that you have some personal investments in Costa Rica.
Man, I probably should chill out for a bit. Last year, I bought quite a bit. I bought a couple commercial properties. I bought a couple little one-bedroom vacation rentals. One I'm renovating, and I kind of want to get one more.
Right.
I'm looking more for the same. Like I'm looking at another one of that, and then a little commercial property.
Yep.
So for me, I'm still maintain my bullishness on rental yielding properties, especially affordable rental yielding properties.
Yeah.
I just feel like you've got upside, you can't go back down. I like cash flow. That's where I'm focused on.
Hey, I'm with you, man. I mean, there's no point in holding asset unless it produces cash flow sometimes. So I like an asset that also produces cash flow where I can ride the appreciation and also get some cash return from it. So I think you just answered it, but I'm going to ask you, if you did inherit $500,000 and had to invest it into a business or real estate in Costa Rica, what would you do with it and why, David?
Yeah, I'd probably go, man, I'm kind of bad. I like volume, right? So I like to buy, if I've got 500, I'd rather buy 2 or 3 properties than probably buying the one property. So I'd probably stretch it out and go with what I've been buying in my portfolio and kind of go with more of those little properties. That's just me. But you could definitely make the argument that, some of these premier properties at a good price. I mean, there was one I really liked that's on a 6th floor, stunning ocean view. I mean, it was at 390. I mean, something like that. I think anytime that you can get unobstructed, great premier ocean views in our market, you're not going wrong, right? Because it's such a premium here that I don't think people understand to the extent of how limited the stunning ocean view properties are.
If I'm correct, is Jaco beachfront titled?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Which is not often to see. A friend of ours actually bought a beachfront lot there and is building a home. And I completely forgot that a lot of that beachfront is titled.
All of it, all of Jaco beachfront is fully titled. And that's, even if you buy something on the beach in Costa Rica, it's hard to still get the view, right? Yeah. The thing is, to get the view, you've got to get elevated. So to find a spot where you can hear the waves crashing, because all these other properties up in the mountains, you're not going to have that proximity. It's a different type of view. So it's very, very rare to have that, tower type view and be on the sand.
Yeah. Well, just for the listeners to understand, titled to concession. Titled is, of course, you actually own the property, meaning it's got a title. Concession is you're basically renting it from the government, typically on a 20-year lease or 7-year lease, depending on how you do it. But of course, most people are going to want to hold it in a corporation with a 20-year lease. So, but anyway, David, this has been amazing. I really appreciate your time. Very insightful. I think, again, Jaco has, you guys have got some new product coming online here, some new pre-construction stuff. Again, I think it's a good thing sometimes when you're running out of inventory because it's going to drive the prices up, but we shall see. And I'm sure that we'll have you on the podcast again. And anyone that wants to contact David, I'll put all of his contact details in the description.
Awesome. Good talking to you. And I'm sure we'll see you here in Jaco pretty soon. You do for a trip out here?
Probably. No more bachelor parties for me now. I think that was the last friend to get married. So yeah.
Yeah, nice. All right. Well, hey, pleasure, Richard. I'll talk to you soon.
Have a good one. Hey guys, great podcast there with David Carr. Again, we've had him on a couple of times before. Just people love his podcast. I can see by the downloads and also the comments. So I thought I'd get him on there again. Some great information there on the process of purchasing here in Costa Rica and also the Jaco area as well. That's Jaco, guys, not HACO, Jaco. In Spanish, J's become basically H's. So anyone that wants some information on Jaco, feel free to reach out to David. You can also reach out to me as well. I'm very familiar with the area. I'm always passing through, or actually spend a lot of time in Los Sueños with the family, playing golf there in tournaments. Usually charity tournaments, just because I'm not good enough to play in a real tournament. But anyway, anyone that wants to get in contact with me, would like to explore anything at all, my email is info@investingcostarica.com. That's info@investingcostarica.com. Again, my name is Richard Beckson, here to help anyone that needs it. Until the next episode, guys, I will, as we say, love you and leave you. Thanks very much. Bye.